Hello and welcome back to the second part of the France 24 debate. I'm Annette Young. Well, the ripples from the ongoing battle with the Islamic State Group have now well and truly extended into neighbouring Turkey. Ankara's campaign against both the Islamic State forces and Kurdish militants in Iraq is stirring fresh debate amid allegations that its target list is longer than it claims. Now, Turkey is admitting that it's carrying out air raids on both IS positions alongside those of Kurdish militant PKK group in Iraq following last week's violent attacks, but it does deny that it's been targeting Kurdish positions in Syria. Also tomorrow, a NATO meeting will be held in Brussels at the request of Turkey to discuss their ongoing military campaign. Well, confused? Well, hopefully here to discuss what the Turkish involvement means for what has become an even more messy conflict is Emre Demir, the editor of Zaman France, a newspaper, Dominique Trinquant, a military analyst, William Jordan, a former US State Department official, also from Ankara, Nazmiye Gur, a member of the leftist and pro-Kurdish HDP, and also from Ankara, Muhittin Ataman, the Deputy Director of the Turkish think tank CETA, which is the Foundation for Political, Economic and Social Research. Also a reminder that you, the viewer, can contribute to the debate. Just tweet us here at #F24Debate. Now, before we go any further, let's take a listen to what the White House spokesman had to say about Turkey's decision to embark on an aerial campaign.
The U.S., of course, recognizes the PKK specifically as a terrorist organization. So, again, Turkey has a right to take action related to terrorist targets, and we certainly, again, appreciate their interest in accelerating efforts against ISIL.
William, I'm just going to ask you this question in another way. Has Washington made a Faustian pact so that they can access those air bases?
Maybe, but it won't be the first time that Washington's made the wrong choice as far as a Faustian pact is concerned. I mean, the United States has had to deal with this question of Turkey's attitude towards the PKK for a long time. Back when I was in Syria 20-odd years ago, it was pretty easy to be against the PKK because the PKK was closely aligned with the Assad regime, which was supporting terrorists, including the PKK. And things seem to be a bit more straightforward, and I think they became much less clear every time Iraq was involved, because whether you go back to the 1991 Provide Comfort operation that the United States provided over Turkish objections to help Iraq's Kurds deal with an onslaught by Saddam Hussein's army, or you go back and forth to other situations in which the United States was trying to use the Iraqi Kurds for its benefit in Iraq. Turkey was running an operation that at times was difficult for the United States to be able to deal with. When the Turks seemed to be on our side fighting against the same people we were fighting against, it was fine. But then there were times when the Turks would go too far, as we saw it, and attack other Kurdish targets. So, like I say, I think that we're talking about a situation that's playing out right now. How it will play out down the road, if the situation in Syria or Iraq changes suddenly, and we need to use Incirlik or not use Incirlik for other things. We get back to this point the General raised during the break about whether or not air power is ultimately the only thing the coalition can really bring to the fight, because ultimately you've got to win or lose on the ground. I mean, so much is in play right now. I think Washington is struggling to catch up to it all, and who knows what Turkey may do next. I mean, they've been talking about carving out these safe havens in the north, the idea being that somehow you would do that exclusively with air power. I just don't imagine how you can ultimately do that. You're ultimately going to have to put troops on the ground. How does Washington respond then?
Dominic, that's what Ankara is saying, that they have no plans to send in ground troops. But as William says, how is that possible if you indeed want to have a successful campaign?
Exactly. I mean, having the bargain between having these bases and losing the combatants on the ground is a very dangerous game, because the airstrike are helping to fight Daesh, but the people on the ground are the people who will win, and the people who are winning currently are the Peshmerga or the Shiite currently, and now more and more perhaps Sunni tribes in the west of Iraq. So this is where you put your money, on the people who are fighting on the ground, because on the aircraft, of course, it's more expensive to send aircraft carrier and people coming from Kuwait, or it's more expensive, it's less reactive. But I don't think that's the game is fair. I mean, you need to have people on the ground.
Talking about the domestic fallout of these moves, let me now talk to Muhittin in Ankara. Now, Turkey brokered that historic peace agreement with the PKK some 2 years ago. It certainly brought about calm and stability to the country's southeastern region. Is that peace process now dead and buried?
Let me first start at one of the biggest gambles that the AKP government initiated was the initiation of the peace process itself. The AK Party government was trying to continue this peace process, even though there were some, unfortunately, negative developments in the Rojava region in northern Syria. But in the last month, unfortunately, many explanations made by the PKK leaders and PYD leaders that they declared that the ceasefire is ended. So unfortunately, there was an intensive attack coming from two different threats. One from the PKK and its affiliates, and the second one was from Daesh, both from the southern border with Syria. So when these attacks intensified, the AKP government decided to face these two different challenges. It's quite weird that when we think that in a minute there are 4 different actors fighting in Syria, in the Syrian civil war, Turkey is recognizing only one side as a legitimate partner, which is the Syrian National Coalition, a large moderate coalition, which Turkey is trying to cooperate with the United States, and they are trying to support this, strengthen this actor in order to get rid of the Assad regime in Syria. But unfortunately, both Daesh and PYD, they are not directly struggling, challenging the existence of Assad regime. Just 2 days ago, the leader of PYD threatened Turkey if the attacks against PYD continues, they will leave the territory under their control to the Assad regime, which is quite, as I have said, is quite weird that they are not getting rid of the alliance with the Assad regime.
At this point, let me just hang on, Muhittin, let me just get some reaction here from
While
Emre.
we're questioning the timing of these operations against the PKK, but we have to remind that the PKK is also to blame here. After all, they were the ones who decided to end the ceasefire and killed 2 police officers in their bed. So they have to. PKK has to understand that terrorism as a political tool will not work in Turkey, and they have now the biggest political victory of the Kurdish society in their history. So PKK has to change the strategy regarding to Turkey. They have maybe to focus on Syria, and HDP here, we're talking about the HDP, the political party, must decide whether they will lead a national political party or a marginalized Kurdish nationalist party.
Nazmi, let me talk to you then. What is the political fallout of these decisions?
Well, I'm not going to answer all this PKK, all this AKP propagandas there, but it's very clear that AKP has broken this peace process. Unfortunately, from the beginning up to now, there was no sincerity by AKP or Mr. Erdogan towards this peace process. It was the Kurds and Kurdish movement, political movement, who really gave lots of efforts, spent lots of efforts to keep this process open. And we know that the latest PKK officers and PKK announcements about the peace process, it's very clear. Mr. Öcalan also remembered this declaration in Dolmabahce. He clearly underlined that he is ready for lay down of the weapons if Turkey start with him officially this negotiation. But Mr. Erdogan rejected, and Mr. Erdogan unfortunately destroyed the table.
Nazmi, your party leader has claimed that Erdogan's policies on Syria is leading the country to civil war. Would you agree?
I fully agree with that, because from the beginning up to now, we criticized AKP and Davutoğlu's foreign policy in Middle East and towards Syria. They are ready to support the civil war in Syria, and we know that, and there are thousands of evidences in foreign medias, in Western medias, that how AKP support ISIS. This is not a secret.
And Muhittin, what would be your response to what Nazmi has just said?
Yeah, I totally disagree with Mr. Gür, since Turkey is not supporting the civil war, first of all. Turkey was supporting any movement, any challenge against the Assad regime. This is not supporting the civil war. Turkey did not initiate the civil war in Syria. Turkey just tried to prevent the mass killings of the Syrian citizens. You know, Turkey is now hosting around 2 million Syrian refugees. So far, Turkey has expended more than 15 billion US dollars directly or indirectly for these refugees. So not to forget this significant point. The second point is Turkey did not initiate any aggressive act against PKK or PYD or Daesh. They just tried to use the military engagement rules and respond to any attacks coming from the other side of the border. We shouldn't forget that you know, the leadership of PKK and PYD, they declared several times, just 2 weeks ago, they wrote down articles in their journals that they have ended the ceasefire, and they decided to begin a new revolutionary war against the Turkish state. And unfortunately, all these explanations came during the negotiations for a possible coalition government with the CHP. So the AKP leaders were and are still trying to get established a coalition government with any party. They do not have any red line. Unfortunately, HDP is one of the parties that has red lines. They just rejected to make any collaboration with any other parties. This is the second important point.
Muhittin, let me also just bring in. Let me just bring in now, William, because all of this political backlash that we're now seeing, this must be of enormous concern to the White House.
Absolutely. It certainly, look, I mean, the General's already pointed out that one of the things that's coming into play here is that you have attacks being made in the theater of operations against the people on the ground who are among the most efficient fighters in the ground combat, which is ultimately the most important part of the combat. If Turkey, which is now, you know, sort of haltingly really getting into the coalition by allowing the U.S. And presumably others to use the Incirlik air base, is suddenly going to reactivate, and I'm sorry, I mean, I'm going to put it in terms of the government here has a major amount of responsibility in terms of how it responds to provocation by PKK elements inside Turkey. If the government decides that it is going to make now the fight against its Kurds a central part of this fight, or Kurds in general, it's a central part of this fight. There's supposed to be a coalition directed against the Islamic State. There's no hope, as I think the General was saying earlier, of this coalition going forward in a coherent way. This is just part and parcel of one of the many contradictions and problems that this coalition has had from the get-go. And I think that Turkey, in a way, the United States needs to press Turkey to make some real decisions, because I think many Americans are still baffled by why President Erdogan, when he initiated this dialogue with the PKK very courageously many years ago, against all expectation, did not pursue it to the end, and that you still have clearly in Turkey a very neuralgic and very difficult and intractable problem with Turkey's Kurds.
Dominic.
Yeah, I think we've got a major problem because the coalition is facing a major threat. Daesh is the threat. We must realize that. And all the people are fighting against this threat. There will be a meeting tomorrow in Brussels, in NATO, asked by Turkey, and all the people around the table will say, this is our threat. And in fact, all the discussion about internal problem in Turkey, which is something else. I don't see that. Of course, there are interaction between both, but the first thing we must realize is that we've got to fight, and the Peshmerga, PKK, is part of the fight with us against Daesh.
Emre.
Well, I think the answer is simple. Can Turkey solve the Kurdish problem by military means? I think the answer is simple. No. Turkey has used these methods for 40 years now, and the result was always the same, rooting for the same methods again. Airstrikes to Kandil in Iraq, Kurdish. That will change nothing. So I think that the attack against the PKK is related to domestic politics, and Turkey must focus.
But do you think it's a mistake as a result?
Of course, I think that it's a mistake to engage a simultaneous war against the PKK and Daesh or ISIS. Turkey must focus on the war against the ISIS. It's not a very clever decision. I suspect that many analysts in Turkey suspect that it is related to domestic politics, and it's a very risky gamble.
And do you think President Erdogan will be interested in hearing what the international community has to say about that?
I think right now he's very receptive to international critics, because there's two reasons for that. I think the deal between Iran and the West has weakened Turkey's role in the region, has weakened the bargaining power of Turkey. So I think Erdogan wants to cooperate more and more with. Secondly, Turkey has finally seen the effects of ISIS. The government sees the ISIS now as an internal security threat. So these two factors are very important in Erdogan's mind. It's not always about domestic politics games, and the shift about ISIS is real, and it's related also to these factors.
Dominic, let's just come back to the actual logistics of this decision. The New York Times and other American media outlets are reporting that both Turkey and the United States have agreed in general to sort of establishing a secure zone along the border there in a plan that would sweep the Islamic State Group from a 100 kilometres long strip of that border. How badly is that secure zone actually needed?
No, I think it will be useful, because a lot of the logistic support of Daesh is coming through the Turkish border. So that's probably one part of the bargain, is that okay, we will not criticize. I was interested in seeing that the first word saying at the White House was against PKK, the first words. So I will say that, but you will provide me the basis and establish a buffer zone in order for Daesh to be unable to move through this border. So I think it is useful, but this will not lead to victory. This will only hamper a bit what's happening with Daesh.
And William, whatever happens, that plan is going to put American and Allied warplanes closer than ever to areas where Syrian aircraft are regularly operating and bombing, raising a question of what will they do if Syrian warplanes attack their partners on the ground?
They'll wipe them out. I mean, if the Syrian Air Force decides it wants to fly against coalition aircraft, they'll be knocked out of the sky. I mean, that will open the door to taking just military action against Syria, the Syrian military, which I hope doesn't happen. I hope the Syrians are responsible and smart enough. They can carry on however they want rhetorically about whatever is happening, but I think they've just got to sit back And unless they really wanted to sort of play the Islamic State card and attack in order to make this an impossible conflict, a very bloody, violent conflict without any immediate end, and only for the sake of lashing out. I mean, otherwise, I don't really know what the Syrians would be accomplishing.
At this point, let me ask both Nazim and Muhittin. Surely, at some point, Turkey had to get involved in this conflict in some form or fashion. Nazmi?
Yes. Well, the border, most of the border, as you know, that controlling by PYD and security forces, still their 3 cantons they controlled, they never turn their weapons to Turkey. They always trying to get to be a very good neighbor with Turkey, and they want to extend their relations with Turkey, not only political relations, but also diplomatic and trade relations as well. We know that Turkey, time to time, provide some help, and we know that Turkey gives a lot to refugees. This is true, but a buffer zone in Syria controlled by Turkey, this is not realistic. It's better to have a really a border which controlled by really Syrian people, including PYD and other democratic forces, which gives more security to Turkey and cut immediately relationship of AKP and Daesh there, because we know that there are lots of logistics from Turkey, and AKP never stopped Daesh there. That's why it's very important for us that in the north of Syria, controlled not only by the Kurds, but also by all the other democratic forces, including some important groups from Free Syrian Army. Together, I guess they can create more security, not only for Syrian people, but also for Turkey and for international allies. And
there's been also, there will be incredible political fallout from this decision, won't there?
Sure, but Turkey is still afraid of having links between 3 Kurdish cantons, Afrin, Kobani, and Jazira. We know that Turkey, PYD now controlling, they controlled Tel Abyad, and they joined 2 cantons, and there are 90 kilometers only between Afrin and Kobani. So if really, together with the Kurds, because there is only Kurds in the ground who really fight heroically against Daesh in the field, so they can control easily there, and they are not threatening Turkey anymore, and they are not going to threat Turkey in the future as well. What they want, they really want to simply having good relation, as Turkey has with KRG. They have also good relation and neighborhood with Turkey. I have talked to Mr. Salih Muslim, Asi Abdullah, the leadership of PYD. They traveled several times to Turkey, and they met with Turkish Foreign Affairs, and they also raised these ideas to Turkey. What they want to have good relations. So not necessarily for Turkey to create a buffer zone there.
And that's me at this point. I'm just very quickly, I'm going to ask Muhittin just to respond to what you've been saying, and after that, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap things up. Muhittin?
Okay. Yeah, there are several significant points to mention. The first one is what are the main goals of Turkey vis-a-vis the recent developments in northern Syria? The first is Turkey is trying to keep away the violence and the chaos from its borders, which Daesh and PYD are trying to bring the chaos and the violence not only to the border of Turkey, but inside of the Turkey, as we have witnessed during the last week's developments. The first aim of Turkey is just to take away this violence and chaos. The second one is Turkey, since from the beginning of this Syrian civil war, was decided not to close its borders with Syria because of humanitarian reasons. But unfortunately, both Daesh and PYD, PKK and all its affiliates, they exploited this situation.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm really sorry. We're going to have to leave it there because sadly we've run out of time at this point. Let me bring in Media Watch editor James Creedon.
This is not true. It's really propaganda.
I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry. We're going to have to leave it there. At this point, it's time now for Media Watch. I'm joined here in the studio by our Media Watch editor, James Creedon. James, you've been looking at the Turkish front pages about obviously what's becoming a very, very messy story indeed.
That's right, and I suppose the opinions in the Turkish press very much reflect the support or lack of support for the government, whether it's opposition press or pro-government press. Just take a look at some of them. Sabah, which is very much a pro-government newspaper, one of their editorial writers, speaks of a great Turkey and its powerful army, so very much complimentary of the military going on the offensive. Elsewhere, you have Yeni Safak, which is another pro-government newspaper. We decided and we executed, wrote Abdulkadir Selvi. Now, he is a journalist who's actually quite close to President Erdogan, and he congratulated the government or the military for an operation that was cleverly led. You also have Aksam, another pro-government newspaper, which is saying the world pays homage, and this is an example for President Barack Obama in terms of how to, I suppose, deal with ISIS. You also have, I suppose, the other side of the coin, Taraf, which is an opposition newspaper. They are critical of the decision to cede Karakozak to Islamic State forces, and they spoke of a betrayal of the historical figure of Suleiman Shah, who is buried there. So there is also some criticism of the weekend's activities in Syria.
James Creedon, we're going to have to leave it there.
All right. Thanks,
and unfortunately, that's the end of the France 24 debate. Do stay with us because there'll be more news and headlines coming up very shortly indeed.